This is Miss Ashley Esquire. Welcome back to Balance or Hustle Live with Miss Ashley. And we have our special guest, Marsheda Patrice Esquire, as well. So thank you so much for being on. Our topic today that we are going to discuss is centering yourself in your profession. We have Marsheda that is going to help us unpack this very important topic. Marsheda is an She's an entrepreneur as well as being an attorney as well. She's also a public speaker and motivational speaker. She's a teacher and an entrepreneur. She's an awesome person to have for this topic because she has pivoted in life in so many different ways and created so many different opportunities for herself, and she has centered herself in her profession. So please allow me to introduce Marsheda. And also I want to add that she is the creator and founder of Ewulomi Works. And I'm sorry if I mispronounced it, and I'll let you correct me. And also Sheversity as well. So give a round of applause for Miss Marsheda Esquire and joining us today.
Hi.
So thank you so much. So let's go ahead and dive into our topic because we have so much great information in store for you guys today that we would like to unpack. So our topic, centering yourself in your profession, and I'm going to go ahead and allow Marsheda to tell us what that means to her.
Sure. First off, thank you so much for creating this opportunity and this platform and this space that you're creating for so many professional women, especially Black women and women of color. So kudos to you for recognizing the need for this and like allowing our voices to be elevated in that way. And thinking about the topic, for me, when I think about centering myself in my profession, it's really about recapturing my time and recognizing that I get to put myself first and that my profession, anything that I create, so whether it's my professional life, my personal life, anything that I do should be in service to the person that I am, right? A lot of times when we live in this social media society where other people's lives are on display and it's typically their highlight reel. And as ambitious women, right? Like we are constantly going for the promotion. We're going after that thing. Like this is literally balance her hustle. We be hustling, you know what I'm saying? Right. And so like making sure that what you are striving for is actually what you want, not because of what society wants, but it's what you want. So there's a level of intentionality and making sure that it's not just what you want. It's something that's that what you want is actually aligned with who you are. Right.
Okay. So I know you are, Marsheda is full today. There is a whole lot to unpack. Let me understand. So you're saying, let me understand. So basically, centering yourself is basically making sure that you're being intentional within your decisions in your space, right? And not being, while we have society that has set the standard of what we should be or how we should define our careers and ultimately shapes our life, it's important to focus on the self and centering, being the center of your profession is you, right? And being intentional with what feels good to you and where your purpose lies.
Yeah, I think so. We've talked about this. Like I am a creative who happens to be an attorney. Right. I'm not an attorney who's creative. I know myself as a person is creative. I'm gonna have these long nails, these braids may be blonde. I think you met me when they was blonde. I'm gonna have color. I'm gonna be vibrant. I'm creative in how I put my things together. Like even look at yourself, right? And when you look at most attorneys, especially people who litigate, like it's typically gray, navy blue, and black.
Absolutely.
And you might get a little some with a little tan, but you ain't gonna get the type of color that we given, right? And so when we think about being intentional, it's more of even in the little details, what brings me joy? When I show up to a room,
Right.
Am I showing up as myself or who I think I'm supposed to be in order to fit into this space?
And you know what? That's so important because I think a lot of other professional women, and I know we both relate to this as attorneys, and I know that our audience probably will include many other attorneys as well. We struggle with this. This is a real struggle. Do you wear braids to professional and corporate meetings? That's a whole topic in itself, and we actually may expand on it, but we can definitely touch on it here. And I think I actually initially struggled with, okay, now I'm going to law school, and we even had classes that kind of gave us guidelines on how we should present ourselves and what we should not wear. And so, or what we should wear. And so a lot of that was completely different than who we have molded ourselves and how we're being intentional with ourselves today, right? We're wearing braids. We both have colored nails and colored lipsticks, and actually wearing colors that are not considered professional. And so that is very, very important. And I think it's a struggle for most professional women. I think braids is always something questioned, like, okay, it's not just, is it just a vacation hairstyle, or can you wear braids to your everyday corporate job? And also, understanding that. So for me, I'll definitely say I have found my intentional self. And I think it's a natural struggle for most people. What do you think?
I think it's a natural struggle because we live in a society that tells you to focus on doing. They ask you, what do you want to do when you grow up?
Right.
Instead of like, who do you want to be? Right. Like meaning, and when they say be, it's like, it's still some title. I want to be a lawyer. Being a lawyer is not your existence.
Right.
So we live in a society that doesn't want you, in my opinion, to be connected to this is who I am as a person and how I exist. Because when you are connected to who you are as a person and how you exist, that's where your power comes from. That's when you start disrupting structures.
Absolutely.
Right. And so I think it's a natural struggle. I think the answer about braids, about whatever you wear, is what is going to be the best reflection of me when I am moving in this space? What is at stake? Right? Like, I think you have to be strategic, right? Like, I graduated and I had blue braids in my hair. I graduated cum laude from Northwestern, right? I'm that girl. I'm really good at what I do. And so you're going to get over the fact that, like, when I just associate it, if I'm really great at what I do,
right?
Like, you're going to accept the fact that I got blue braids. It's a part of my branding at this point. Right. And it became my battle armor. Like, it took a while. It took a while for me to get comfortable wearing my hair straight or wearing it with wigs once I graduated from law school. Because in law school, my braids were my battle armor. So I think that's what I needed in order to be able to show up. But I think I think the other part is, like, what do you need to show up as your best you?
Right. Let me ask you this. And as for professional women, what type, in your experience, and then I'll also answer, what type of challenges, and as professional women, whether corporate or entrepreneur, I think as an entrepreneur, a lot of times you have a little bit more flexibility, but when you're working with people, there's still a level of standard that may not be a part of your identity. And actually, does the standard really exist, or is it a standard that's in our head that we need to just focus in on our intentional self? And that's when we're being our best version of ourselves. But my question is, what struggles, right, for professional women and that maybe that you've experienced, right? And that might be like a microaggression where you show up to a meeting with blue hair and you're also an attorney and they weren't ready for that, right? What has been your experience with that, and going into professional settings, and what kind of pushback, right, or rejection, or because here's one thing too that we definitely want to talk about, is that we talk about oftentimes diversity, right, and inclusion, or surrounding ourselves. There's this huge movement in surrounding ourselves with diversity. But we also realize that inclusion is a completely different topic. You can be in the room, but am I really included? Right? I'm in the room because that shows the diversity of a corporation or of a board. But to include me, or is my voice being heard? So just to answer, I don't want to deviate too much because there's so much to unpack. But just to answer that question, what is the experience?
So for me, my personal experience is, I do believe in being unapologetically yourself, but I
Right.
also believe in strategy. So
Okay.
I could graduate with blue braids because I'd been in law school for 3 years and I built a brand.
Okay.
Like I think that we are all walking brands, whether you
Absolutely.
are an
We are.
entrepreneur or whether
We
there
are.
is a name
Hmm.
like especially if you're like me, I'm the first person in my immediate family to go to law school, to go to college, so like
Right.
or to complete it, right? And so like if that is the case, then we're not coming in with the same amount of capital that our counterparts may be coming in with. But the thing that you can get without money, I mean, it helps, but it's influence, and you can get influenced by the name and the meaning that's associated with your name. And
Right.
so,
So the name, image, and likeness, which
yeah,
is
the name,
right.
yeah,
I like
right.
it. Right.
And so, to me, it depends, right? If I know that I am dealing with a slightly more conservative crowd,
Hmm.
I may have just I may if I when I initially meet them, they may just get black braids,
Okay.
right? Or if it's I don't care if they're conservative, I recognize that I may be penalized for this, but I only want to be in these particular spaces anyway. If they can't accept me like this, then they don't need to have me. I am more in that camp now that I'm later on in my career, and that I left my job. Like I wasn't pushed out. I left my job. You know what I mean? And so like they still wanted me as is. And so there's something that's very empowering about leaving a space to build a new space that
Okay.
allows you to walk into yourself in a different way. But I would definitely say, like, especially earlier on in my career, um, especially in law school, where I went to a predominantly like I grew up in Lansing, Michigan, which
Okay.
is beautiful in the sense of I grew up around like at least 53 different nationalities. In my household, there's Yoruba spoken because my dad is Nigerian. There's Arabic spoken because my mom is a South Sudanese refugee, and then English because my birth mom is American Black. And so like all three of those cultures and me hearing different languages, just seeing people having different ways of life, and like being around a lot of different nationalities at the same time, not just in my house, but at the school that I went to.
Absolutely.
I was used to seeing Black, white, brown people at all different levels. And like a lot of the people still work either for GM or GM supplier, the big three. And so like we were still connected in being blue collar. And like going to undergrad, and then especially and then spending time in DC where you see professional Black women wearing all types of hairstyles and they just are serving and slaying, right? Because I also think that this is a regional thing, right?
Okay.
And then getting to law school, and if I change my hair, they don't know that I'm the same Black person. It's a different experience. And I'm literally some pepper in the midst of milk. So I stand out. It's to be grossly visible and invisible simultaneously. And so I think that the way that you deal with that challenge, it's not just, oh, I need to connect with myself. I think that's a part of it, but then also realizing that we are bodies moving in systems. And so what does this system respect? How do you identify the loopholes and circumvent them so that you can still have you present, and still elevate?
Right. So I love that you pointed out strategy. I think for maybe most people, maybe they're at a point where it's about strategy, right? And how they may navigate through these spaces. Also, I think definitely some of our younger professionals that may just be getting started, this is something that they actually this is probably something that's very constant for them, right? And so one of the things that I know that we had discussed is also, moving as you navigate through your career, right? So once you kind of identify this and you're like, you know what, I'm tired of being in this very limited space, right? Confined space, and I'm not being true to myself, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not being my best version of myself. I know that there's so much more for me. And so
Yeah.
we talked about moving in with intention. And what does
Yes.
that look like as life evolves, right? And there's changes that's happening, maybe there's other opportunities that comes available to you. Start navigating life and moving in intention so that you can become the best version of yourself, right? And to evolve into the person that you know that you are, and without all the confinement, right? That
Yeah.
may be given to us in certain structures. And one thing I want to point out, and I know we talked about this, is also realizing all opportunities are unique and not every opportunity is the same. And
Yes.
so I know we talked about moving in intention. And so creating these spaces or finding these spaces that allows you to be that. What do you think about? What do you think about what I just said?
I think what you said is 100% spot on. And sometimes it's hard to find those spaces. I like to think about,
Mm-hmm.
at least the way that I'm moving, I have urgent intentionality, right?
Urgent.
And it's urgent because life is not promised. And
Right.
part of it has come through COVID. Part of it has come through just people really being taken away from me unexpectedly and very quickly.
Right.
And so when you are met with death, like there's the grief, but then there's also a sense of urgency of like nothing is promised.
Right.
And so to me, jumping on sitting down with myself and like constantly having a checklist of checking in is, am I happy? What truly brings me joy? What do I mean by happiness? Right? Like, and I think happiness is temporal. Like you're not going to be happy all the time, but is my baseline, I get to come back to happiness at some point during my day, you know? Is do I feel full? Right? Like, even though part of what inspired me to move to Arizona, because I practiced in Chicago.
Okay.
Lived and practiced there. Part of what inspired the move was I was in a car on a family vacation. Everybody else is in the amusement park, and I'm sitting in the car, and I look at God. Well, I couldn't see him, but I'm talking to God, and I'm like, what am I doing with my life? I just passed this ordinance. I should be happy. Like, people who are in power, especially in policy, I'm a policy attorney. They know my name. They listen to me. People call, like they come to me for strategy. I should be happy. I'm this young Black woman, right? And I'm doing it. I've done it, but I'm not happy. What am I doing with my life? And allowing the universe and like being very intentional about my own internal flow and trusting my voice. So I think the other part about centering yourself in your career is, do you listen to yourself the first time? So often as women, we know exactly what we're supposed to do or not do, or to sit or whatever. But do we actually listen the first time? Do we talk ourselves out of it? And so part of it for me is, am I listening to that voice? One, and am I creating space to make sure that I constantly hear her? Am I creating silence so that I can hear my best self? So that I can commune with my creator, so that I know that the way that I'm moving is something that I'll be proud of. That my 17-year-old self, because people are like, what advice would you give to your 17-year-old self? I won't get nothing to her because baby girl had it going on. I'm trying to get back to my 17-year-old self. She was mad bold. She did not care. And so my goal is to make her proud. Would she be proud?
But absolutely, Marsheda, I think that that's excellent. And I think we all have those moments at some point in our lives and in our careers. Like, what am I doing? Is this, it's not making sense anymore. It's not fun anymore. So we all have those moments. And I think oftentimes it's triggered by an event.
Yep.
Right. Sometimes it's an event that we may experience. And sometimes we may even feel like it's a divine event that kind of comes in our lives to kind of shake things up, to kind of get things back in line, to get us to the next level and the next stages in our lives. And so definitely very powerful. And one thing that you said that I have to put emphasis on is, what will it take for me to listen to myself the very first time? Because oftentimes we know as women, our intuition is usually right about circumstances, right, that we experience, whether in our personal life, our professional life. We usually see the red flags. We usually see the disappointment coming. or the letdowns or whatever it might be, and but we still move forward with some sort of expectation when we already know that internally that it's not going to work out in the way that we may hope for it to. So that is a very, very powerful statement. And I think that should be, I hope, definitely write that down. What does it take for me to listen to myself the first time? And one thing I think too, Marsheda, if definitely want to speak about it, but I definitely think over time this is something that we probably both have learned with experience. Like, we're not wasting time with something that we know is not going to work out, right? Or it's a relationship or a job where you have individuals at this point in their career that we're actually turning down jobs that actually may pay more for a job that we know aligns more with our purpose, right?
Yeah.
And being intentional. I mean, we hear that all day long. Actually turn down a job that paid more because another job offers me something that's more intentional and that actually bears fruit, right?
Yep.
That aligns with my purpose. And I know we talked about that as well. So let me ask you this: as Black women, right? What do you think we can do in centering ourselves in our profession and some of the things that we may experience to be more intentional?
So before I jump into that, there are a couple of things that I really want to highlight that you said, because you out here dropping gems, baby, and we can't just let the gems be left.
It's reciprocal.
But you talked about the divine, and I like to call them divine disruptions. And how do we lean into those? Because a part of listening to yourself the first time, right? Believing yourself the first time and listening is recognizing when we've identified, okay, this is disruption. And I think that your purpose usually the disruption is connected to getting you closer to your purpose, and your purpose provides provision. So when you were saying like, yo, this bears fruit, right? Recognizing that just because that job gave you more money up front, the fruit that's going to come because it's aligned with your purpose, because your purpose has to provide provision, right?
Right. Absolutely.
What's going to come will give you will not only give you money, because people be like, oh, well, I'm just full on the spirit. Baby, we live in a capitalist society.
Right.
We still need coin.
Absolutely.
Okay?
It matters.
It matters.
Right.
It matters. So there's that. But just also recognizing that sometimes it's about the weight, right? Like grapes are best when they're crushed and they're like they become wine. That's how. And the older the wine, the more the worth goes up. And so I just think that also just pointing out to people like the importance of patience and like how you wait. But to go back to your question, because I hate when I ask questions and people don't answer me.
So I definitely want to talk about weight, because that's something that I guess we're gonna be doing this all night, right? Back and forth. You said this, and now I have to address this, put more emphasis on it. But definitely, it is in the weight, right? Because I think even as I look at my life, and I know you can say the same thing. There's things that I'm seeing manifest in my life that I was actually praying for and hoping for and planning for now today. That were, maybe, as a teenager, maybe in junior high, or maybe in high school. And, years later, 10, 15, 20 years later, you start to see certain things manifest in your life. And so I really want to put emphasis on this, especially for those who are listening. It's in the weight. It definitely is the victory, and everything that you are expecting and everything that you're desiring is in the weight. It's not an idle weight though, right? It's not an idle weight or not a passive weight, but it's in the weight. And I do believe with the right, not someone that not necessarily being busy, right, but being busy and also productive. You will actually see the fruit that you are from the seeds that you planted years ago, right? If you take 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. But I do feel very strongly about that. And then also, oftentimes it's because we give up too soon. But that's a completely different topic.
Girl.
We're going to have to do part two. But definitely it's in the weight. And I know that we both can say, like, that is so true. It's definitely in the weight. So Definitely. So one of the things as women, as Black women in the profession, right? How can we center ourselves to be our authentic selves within our professional spaces? One
Yeah.
thing that I wanted to say, so that's the question. One thing that I read, right, that says that how can we compete in a costume contest, right? How can we compete in a costume contest and expect to win?
Oh, okay.
So let me just, that's gonna just, I know
Can
that's go,
can
I'll let you go ahead, do your, yeah,
okay. So
unpack.
I think the first part is centering yourself is you have to know yourself.
Right,
You can't center yourself in your profession if you're not centered in your life.
right,
It just logically doesn't compute. And so you have to get to know you, what feeds you, what drains you, what
right,
refuels you, and like
right,
what also helps you be at rest. Right?
right,
Like I think we expend different types of energy. You expend physical, you expend spiritual, and you expend mental and emotional.
mm-hmm.
Right? I think we tend to try to group in the spiritual and mental, but they're different.
Okay,
They feel different um in the body, right? And so I think that the first part is, how do you go to your quiet place? What do you sound like? How do you talk to yourself?
right,
This is not conventional wisdom, but I went to law school with no intention of ever practicing law. It surprised me that I actually worked as a lawyer after I graduated,
okay,
because my whole goal was to go to law school to think like a lawyer. The people that I always saw who were making changes at the school level, because I was a teacher before that, before going to law school, who were making changes, who were out and like with the protesters and different things like that, there was always a lawyer present. So I never thought that I would ever like stand up in court or anything like that. And I loved English. And so I was like, based off of my own skill set, and I know I want to change the world, what's the thing that's gonna get me there the closest? And
right,
it was becoming a lawyer. And then I was like, okay, well, if I'm gonna be a lawyer, where am I gonna get access? Right. And so
right,
that's how I chose my law school. Right. Like it wasn't like, oh, I'm doing this because it looks good to people.
right,
I know that it looks good to people and it's going to gain me more access. But
right,
at the end of the day, the decision is very much tied to, this is going to help me and my personal goals. So
right,
it's sitting with yourself, making sure you understand what feeds, motivates you, all of those things. But then, are your goals truly your goals? And they're not something that your parents have told you, right?
right,
Like, you should become this because this is what I think you're good at, right?
right,
Or that I can make money off of this. Again, if you are making, I have a number of friends who are making six figures,
mhm,
but they're spending those six figures because they're trying to do retail therapy to make themselves feel better,
right.
right?
And
And
you're
I got
right.
go
You're
ahead.
absolutely right. I think law school, I mean, and a lot of other professional programs, it's not for just someone who's looking to gain a title. One thing that they put us through is very rigorous and a high level of scrutiny, and everything is like, and it's, can be very expensive as well. But definitely have to understand your why, and understanding your why and your purpose is also identifying yourself. And
Yeah.
so identifying yourself and getting to know yourself, I think that that's something that comes in time. And I think one of the key points that I want to identify and getting to know yourself in order that so that you can center yourself in your profession and be intentional, is getting to know yourself, and also spending time alone.
Yeah.
Is spending time alone, not necessarily always with other people around, and
I
what that
journal.
makes like for individuals. I think that's a lot of alone time, and building a relationship with yourself. And
Mm-hmm.
and I think another component is that is like you just said, is unbelieving yourself the first time, right? So when you feel certain things, believing yourself the first time as you get to know yourself. Another key point that I wanted to add to that is in building the strength to say no and to speak up for yourself is when you
Mm.
know yourself, right? So
Yeah.
oftentimes we say yes when we really want to say no, and I
I,
think that's
and
another.
I think there's that, and also understanding. So like, when you start to talk to yourself, are you honest?
Hmm.
Are you brutally honest? Are
Right,
you honestly saying like, oh, I'm driven because I want to make people like me? When you
right,
say stuff like that out loud, you may not be comfortable, but
right,
then you can begin to identify this is something that I need to uproot, or like, and so I think like you said, spending that time alone. I journal.
Journal,
Also
prayer,
being intentional about your circle too, because I believe your circle is a reflection of you, right?
Absolutely.
And so people who truly love you, I like to call them your soul court, right? Like your soul court, they know you, they love you, and they will call you out in grace and in love. And if I have a lot of different, like I have a lot of Africans in mind, so it might not always be in grace, but you'll be called out. So I think that there's that. But then the other part of what you had brought up in terms of centering yourself is how do you compete in a costume match, race, whatever. And here's my thing. I don't think you need to compete. I think what you need to do is figure out what's your best outfit that you like. And I'm a firm believer in we put out energy. If I put out what I like, I tell my story the way that I want to tell my story, I will attract my tribe.
Absolutely.
And so my goal is not to race anyone, because this baby girl does not like to run. I hate it with a passion, right? Figuratively and literally. Even though I will. Sorry. Anyway, I got sidetracked. Right? So there's that. So we're not running a race. It's I'm going to set up and trust that I will attract. And I think part of the part of the difficulty is do you have the confidence to do that? And I think where the confidence comes from is accepting that I'm worthy because I exist, not because of what I do or what I produce.
That's right.
And I think especially as Black women and women of color, our labor has been taken for granted in this country and in the society, and it is just expected of us. And so we get caught up in feeling like we have to produce in order to be worthy, to produce for our families, to be self-sacrificing, to be all of these things. And I feel like all women, the idea of being self-sacrificing is like, you see all these Mother's Day cards. It's like, oh, you sacrificed yourself for me. I don't want my children to feel like I sacrificed myself for them. I want my children to know that mommy worked hard to make sure that she was there, but I want them to see mommy pursued her dreams. I want to model to my daughters. Yeah, I want to model to my daughters that I have a purpose and that nobody, including me, gets to get in the way of my purpose. I can kick rocks, you know?
Absolutely. So that is great. So let me ask you this. How can you recenter yourself, right, after you got out of alignment, right, from a harmony, or got out of alignment of how can you recenter yourself after you have got out of alignment with your intention and your fruit and your purpose, and you're no longer bearing fruit? I know we kind of touched on this, but let's just throw out some key points, that we can kind of provide, and we can just actually probably do what we were doing earlier, ping ponging back off of it, because there's so much to unpack and that to provide.
I think the first piece is what usually happens for me. So I can't tell other people exactly what happens for them. But for me, there's typically a divine disruption where if I'm going too long and I'm going too hard and I'm not taking a break, I will get sick. Physically, I will be sat down. Right. And so embrace the disruption.
That's the body that's slowing us down because we're moving too quickly, right? And we're not taking care of our physical body.
Yeah. Absolutely. So embrace the disruption. So I think the first piece is sit down. First part is sit down.
Sit down.
Like create the space to sit down. Like you can, I'm talking about figuratively, but if it's like, I need to, I am very quick to put my phone on do not disturb, tell the people that I love that send a mass text message. I'm disappearing from this time to this time. I'm alive. Right. So, and silencing the noise, right? Like I'm turning off social media. Like for me, I'm very quick to fast because I am a spiritual person, right? Like I'll do a fast. I'm asking for guidance. And but my goal is to get as silent as possible so that I can hear myself. Because part of it is unplugging from all of the different voices and all of the different things that grab our attention span.
Right.
And only in watching things and listening to things that I know pour into my spirit. So I consume interviews like this, like I watch this, you know what I'm saying? And so like, it'll be stuff like this from people that I know. Right. So I think part of it is the sitting down.
So
go ahead. Oh,
so we have the disruption, right? We
mm-hmm.
have sometimes a triggering event, right, that we may experience, and actually silencing. So that may cause us to withdraw from certain environments or certain places, to silence ourselves, silence the noise around us. That may be social media, that may be fasting and praying, right? And so maybe time of meditation and journaling, and that's those are also some elements to consider, right? And then determining the length of the length of which these tasks will last really depends on the individual, because you know when you're ready, right? And you don't do it too prematurely when you emerge back into society, so you don't want to do it too quickly. But then as that as you as you realize when as time evolves, right, and you realize, okay, now I'm ready to, move with a little bit more intention. One of the things is also identifying, like we mentioned earlier, is identifying our community, right, and surrounding ourselves with the resurrounding ourselves, because a lot of who we are and where we're going is who we are surrounded by.
I think the other thing that I want to add, because as you were talking, this is what it made me think about, is so yes, sometimes there's going to be those huge divine disruptions, but there's also the piece of like, how do you recenter throughout the week? How do you recenter throughout the day? And so for me, I have a Sabbath, right? It's not on Sunday because I actually support ministry at my church. So that's not really sitting down, but that's Saturday. If I decide to go to an event, I will go. Otherwise, it has to feel like it's going to fill me.
So I absolutely agree. I think it's not necessarily it's not an annual thing. It's not a quarterly thing. For some people, they may have they may readjust on at the beginning of the year, right? But I think I'm happy that you pointed out it's definitely a weekly thing, right? It can definitely be on a weekly thing. It can be on a daily basis, right? And I actually think that that's very healthy to embrace a model or to embrace structure in your life where you know yourself well enough to know it's time to readjust, right? And it is time to go into a place of rest and relaxation, possibly fasting, possibly praying, surrounding yourself by your supportive community. That's a form of self-care. And then also may actually be something more commercial, or maybe not even commercial, or a different form of self-care, which may mean getting a massage, or going to do some type of your nails, or manicure, pedicure, or maybe even getting your hair done, right? So I definitely think that that's important, right? And understanding when, understanding how frequent, and I think that that's something that comes from the individual. But those are definitely some key points in re-entering communities and identifying your supportive communities. And so those are some key points and some key takeaways from that. And so I hopefully, that's very helpful. But this has been an absolutely wonderful topic. There are so many other subtopics that we can do sub episodes and sub broadcasts, just from the conversation that we had today, because there's so much to unpack. But because we do have a limited time, we're going to have to wrap it up. But definitely, thank you so much, Marsheda. Is there anything else you would like to add?
Sure. You can find me at Sheverse Creative, no E, on IG.
List Marsheda's information down at the bottom of the caption, so then that way you'll have it there. But thank you guys so much for tuning in again. This is Balance or Hustle Live with Miss Ashley, ESQ. Thank you, Marsheda, for being a guest and sharing your input and helping us unpack the topic of centering yourself in your profession, which talks about centering yourself and being intentional, getting to know yourself, being intentional with your strategy and your moves as you navigate in your professional spaces, and being sure that your decisions that you make throughout your life as personal life and professional life is bearing fruit. Um,
Mm-hmm.
is bearing fruit in your life. So thank you so much. That concludes our live. Please comment. There's also going to be a survey at the bottom of this broadcast that if you can click on it, it's going to be a survey that's going to ask you a few questions about your input, and then also about opportunities for coaching as well. So thank you so much. Again, this is Miss Ashley, ESQ, Balance and Hustle Live. Thanks, you guys.